rain on tin, wind through a cracked window, a baby crying from hunger, and in the yellow kitchen light she stood there barefoot, one hand on the counter, the other covering her mouth, staring at the note her husband left behind. Not a goodbye, not an apology, just 6 words. I can't do this anymore, sorry. That was it. No money on the table, no suitcase by the door, no plan. No sound except the cheap clock ticking over the sink and 5 children sleeping in the next room, not yet knowing their whole world had split in half before sunrise. Her name was Elena Carter, and by morning she would be a mother of 5, raising them alone in a town that barely noticed women like her until they broke in public. But Elena didn't break. Not that night. She folded the note once, then twice. Slid it into the junk drawer beside old batteries and unpaid electric bills. Like if she hid it deep enough, maybe the words would stop burning. In the next room, little Noah coughed in his sleep, a dry, tired sound. Her oldest daughter, Mariah, shifted under a thin blanket, one arm wrapped protectively around the twins. The trailer smelled like wet socks, boiled potatoes, and baby powder. A weak lamp buzzed in the corner. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, then silence. Elena looked toward that room and whispered the words that would become her prayer, her habit, her heartbeat. Just make it to morning. That was the rule now. Not next year, not next month. Morning. She didn't sleep. At 4007 a.m., she was sitting at the table in a faded sweatshirt, doing numbers on the back of a grocery receipt. Rent, water, milk, diapers, gas, medication for Noah's chest. The pencil shook in her hand because the math wasn't math anymore. It was triage. It was deciding which knee got to live another week. Then she heard tiny footsteps. Mom? Mariah stood in the doorway, hair tangled, eyes half open. She was only 11, but grief had a way of making children look older in bad light. Elena forced a smile. Baby, why are you up? Mariah looked toward the empty chair at the table. Dad's truck is gone. There it was. The first cut spoken out loud. Elena opened her mouth, closed it. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped harder on the roof. He had to leave, she said softly. For work? The lie almost came. It rose right up to her lips. But kids know. They always know. Elena reached out and pulled Mariah close, pressing the girl's cheek against her shoulder. Mariah smelled like shampoo and sleep. I don't know if he's coming back, Elena whispered. Mariah didn't cry right away. That was the heartbreaking part. She just stood very still, as if she were listening for a truck engine that might still turn into the driveway and undo everything. It didn't. Behind them, a cabinet door suddenly banged open. Then another. Then a loud whisper. I found a cracker. That was Toby, 8 years old. Skinny elbows, big front teeth, a born disaster with the soul of a golden retriever. The kind of child who could make a joke at a funeral and somehow save everyone in the room. He marched into the kitchen holding half a stale saltine like buried treasure. Breakfast champion, he announced. Mariah rolled her eyes and wiped at her face quickly. And Elena, against all logic, against all despair, laughed. Just once, a short sound. Cracked and startled like her body had forgotten laughter still lived in it. Toby looked around. What? Elena shook her head. Nothing, honey. But Toby narrowed his eyes. He was observant in all the wrong moments. Dad leave again? No softness, no setup, just the truth with sneakers on. Elena stared at him. Then Toby's grin faded. He looked at the empty chair, at the receipt, at Mariah's red eyes. Oh, he said quietly. That single word landed heavier than any scream could have. In the back bedroom, the baby began to cry. Then one twin woke up and started crying because the baby was crying. Then Noah's cough turned into a wheezing fit that sent Elena out of her chair so fast it nearly toppled backward. And just like that, grief had no time to sit down. Chaos took over. She scooped up the baby, bounced him on one hip, called for Mariah to get Noah's inhaler, asked Toby, no, begged Toby, to find the clean bottle, though there probably wasn't one. The trailer filled with sound, crying, coughing, drawer handles rattling. The hiss of the stove refusing to light on the first try. The air smelled like formula, damp blankets, and panic. Mom, he can't breathe right, Mariah said, helping Noah sit up. I know, baby, I know. Elena's voice stayed calm. Her hands did not. Noah's little chest worked hard under his dinosaur pajamas. Elena rubbed his back while balancing the baby and trying not to let the twins climb too close to the stove. Outside, dawn was beginning to gray the edges of the window, but the house still felt trapped in nighttime. She wanted 5 more minutes to collapse. 5 more minutes to be the woman whose husband had just vanished. 5 more minutes to hate him. But mothers like Elena didn't get 5 minutes. They got movement, need, noise, bills, little hands pulling at their sleeves. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, Toby handed her a bottle-wrong lid but clean enough and said in a small, serious voice, "I can help." Elena looked at him then, really looked, at all of them. 5 children, 5 mouths, 5 futures. And not one person in that room was going to save them but her. The sky outside turned pale silver. Morning had come. And Elena Carter, abandoned and terrified, made a choice with tired eyes and shaking hands. She would not chase the man who left. She would fight for the ones who stayed. And before the sun was fully up, before the first bill collector called, before the town had a chance to look down on her, she leaned close to her children and whispered the words again. Just make it to morning. She didn't know it yet, but one day, years later, the whole world would understand what that sentence cost her. And what it built. Morning came, but it did not bring mercy. It brought a shut-off notice hanging crooked on the trailer door, damp from the rain. Elena saw it when she stepped outside in her house shoes, carrying a trash bag full of wet paper towels and empty formula cans. The air smelled like mud, cigarette smoke from the neighbor's porch, and the metallic scent that comes right before another storm. A crow screeched from the telephone line overhead. She froze. Final notice. Payment required. The paper shook in her hand. Inside, the twins were arguing over a spoon. The baby had cried so long his voice had turned hoarse. Noah was still wheezing in little bursts. Toby was trying to make everybody laugh by wearing a dish towel like a superhero cape, and Mariah, all 11 years old, was already wiping down the table like she knew the day had teeth. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second, not longer, never longer. Then she opened them and went back inside. "Mom?" Mariah asked quietly. "What is it?" Elena folded the notice so fast it looked automatic. "Nothing I can't handle." That was a lie. But it was the kind mothers tell so their children can swallow breakfast. Except breakfast that morning was half a loaf of bread, 2 bruised bananas, and powdered milk mixed a little too thin. Elena stood at the stove pretending to be busy so the kids wouldn't notice she wasn't eating. The kitchen smelled faintly sour, like old milk and wet wood. The burner clicked, then lit with a soft whoosh. For a second, that blue flame felt like victory. Toby climbed into his chair backward and narrowed his eyes at her. "You're doing the no-toast thing again." Elena glanced over. "The what? The thing where you say you already ate, but you didn't?" Mariah looked up too. Children missed 1,000 things, then somehow noticed the one that hurt most. Elena forced a shrug. "I'm just not hungry." Toby pushed his banana across the table. "Then I'm not either." "No, sir," Elena said, sharper than she meant to. The room went still. Even the twins stopped fighting. Toby lowered his eyes and peeled at the label on the banana with one thumb. "Okay," and guilt hit Elena so fast it felt like heat in her throat. She crouched beside him. The linoleum was cold under her knees. "Hey," she whispered. He didn't look up. She touched his cheek. "I'm sorry." Toby's voice came out small. "Did I do bad?" That question, from a child whose father had left yesterday. Elena swallowed hard. "No, baby. No. You did kind." "That's different." He finally looked at her. "Then why do you look like that?" "Because I'm terrified. Because I don't know how to keep the lights on. Because your father walked out and left me holding the sky up with my bare hands." But she only smiled, the weak smile of exhausted mothers, and kissed his forehead. "Because grown-ups get tired," she said. Toby thought about that, then nodded once like he'd file it away for later. The day moved with the ugly speed of emergency. Elena made calls from the kitchen wall phone while balancing the baby on her hip. She called the electric company, the landlord, the clinic, a church pantry 3 towns over. Every conversation sounded the same after a while, typing, sighing, hold music, polite voices saying there was nothing they could do today. Today. That word became a wall. At 10:12 a.m., the landlord finally answered. He didn't say hello. He just said, "You got my messages?" Elena pressed the phone tighter to her ear and turned away from the kids. "I did. I just need a little time." "You already had time." My husband left. Silence. Not sympathy, just silence. Then a dry exhale. "That's unfortunate, but the rent doesn't care." Elena stared at the peeling wallpaper above the sink. Yellow flowers faded almost white. I have 5 children, and I have a mortgage. Her grip tightened so hard her knuckles whitened. I can get you something by Friday, she said. Please. He paused. Friday, not Saturday, and if you're short again, I'm posting. The line went dead. Elena kept holding the receiver to her ear after the click. The baby tugged at her sweatshirt collar. In the other room, Toby was making race car noises for the twins. Noah coughed into a pillow. Friday, 3 days to become impossible. She set the phone down gently because if she slammed it, she might start screaming, and if she started screaming, she was afraid she would not stop. Then there was a knock at the door, 3 hard raps. Elena's stomach dropped. For one wild second, she thought maybe it was him. Maybe he'd come back ashamed, wet-eyed, carrying excuses and groceries, and the missing half of her life. She opened the door. Not him, Renee, her younger sister. Perfume first. Then heels clicking on the worn porch steps. Then that sharp, polished smile that always seemed more curious than loving. Renee looked like she belonged in a different ZIP code. Camel coat, gold hoops, glossy hair, car still running behind her. Even the air around her smelled expensive, like vanilla and cold leather. Well, Renee said, looking past Elena into the trailer, this is loud. The twins were chasing Toby in circles around the table. The baby was fussing again. Noah sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, pale and tired. Mariah stood in the hallway, instantly guarded. Elena folded her arms. What are you doing here? Renee lifted one shoulder. Mom called. She said Daniel finally did what everyone expected. Elena's jaw tightened at her husband's name. You came to help or watch? Renee gave a little laugh, as if the difference were negotiable. I brought clothes, some canned food. Don't look at me like that. I'm not heartless. She carried in 2 grocery bags and set them on the counter with a theatrical sigh. Toby peeked inside one immediately. Peaches, his voice lit up. For one brief moment the room changed. Hope does that, even when it arrives wearing high heels in judgment. Elena began unloading the bags. Canned peaches, peanut butter, pasta, a pack of socks, some hand-me-down shirts. Her throat tightened at the sight of anything useful. Thank you, she said quietly. Renee glanced around the kitchen. So what's the plan? Elena gave a tired laugh. Survive the week. No, really. That is really the plan. Renee stepped closer and lowered her voice. You can't do this here. Elena kept unloading. You need to be realistic, Renee said. 5 kids, no husband, no savings. This place is one bad leak away from becoming a swamp. Mariah heard that. Elena could tell by the way her shoulders stiffened in the doorway. Renee continued, come stay with me, temporarily. Elena stopped. This was not the offer she expected. Renee lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment 40 minutes away and liked things quiet, clean, and controlled. She complained if one coffee mug sat in the sink too long. The thought of her housing 5 children, one of them a baby and another with breathing issues, felt almost absurd. You serious? Elena asked. Renee smoothed her coat sleeve. I said temporarily. Toby popped up beside them, still holding the can of peaches. Do you got cable? Mariah shot him a look. Toby. But Elena saw it then, the flicker in their faces. Relief. Maybe even excitement. A rescue boat doesn't have to be pretty to look beautiful when you're drowning. Renee noticed it too, and smiled. Not warmly, triumphantly. That's when Elena felt it. The catch. There was always a catch with Renee. Not because she was evil, because she loved leverage too much to give anything cleanly. Elena stood very still. What would you want in return? Renee blinked, almost offended. I'm your sister. Elena waited. Renee looked away first. Then she sighed. You'd need to make some changes. What changes? Renee ticked them off with manicured fingers. Structure, discipline. The older girl should probably help more. The boys are wild. And honestly, she looked around. These kids don't need all this chaos. They need rules. They need order. They need less scrambling. Mariah's face hardened. Toby slowly set the peaches down. Elena felt her chest go hot. There it was. Not help. Control. Not shelter. Judgment disguised as rescue. Renee leaned closer. I'm just saying maybe this happened because you kept trying to be soft about everything. The room went silent. Even the baby somehow stopped crying for half a second. Elena's voice came out low. You think my husband left because I was soft? Renee lifted both hands. Don't twist my words. I don't need to. They're ugly enough straight. Elena, no. It was quiet, but it cut. Elena stepped toward the door and opened it. Rain smell drifted in again. Cool. Damp. Honest. I said thank you for the food, she said. Now go. Renee stared at her. You'd rather let your children suffer than accept help. Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice held. I'd rather suffer beside them than teach them love always comes with humiliation. That landed. Mariah looked at her mother like she had just seen something holy. Renee's face changed. Not guilt, exactly. More like being unused to losing. She grabbed her purse. Fine. Be proud. Let's see how long pride keeps the lights on. Then she walked out, heels clicking, perfume trailing behind her like a line someone had drawn between two kinds of women. The car door slammed. The engine faded, and silence rushed back in, a hard silence, the kind that asks, what now? Toby spoke first. Can we still open the peaches? And Elena laughed again. Because of course that child would place Mercy exactly where it belonged. In syrup or juice, she asked. He grinned. Yes! Even Mariah smiled at that. Elena opened the can. The sweet smell filled the kitchen, bright and soft and almost luxurious. She passed slices around with mismatched forks while rain tapped at the windows and the gray afternoon leaned heavier outside. Noah took one bite and whispered, This tastes rich. Elena nearly cried right there. Instead, she stood at the sink with her back to them, hands braced on either side, and stared out at the muddy yard. Friday. No job lined up, no money coming, no husband returning, no miracle parked in the driveway. Then Toby came beside her, chewing carefully. You did the brave voice, he said. Elena looked down. What brave voice? The one you use when you're scared but don't want us scared too. Her breath caught. Children know. They always know. He slipped his hand into hers, sticky from peach syrup. Just make it to morning, he whispered. Elena turned to him slowly. He smiled, proud he remembered. And something inside her, something bruised and bent and barely breathing, lifted its head again. Morning. Maybe that was enough. Maybe survival didn't need to look noble. Maybe it just needed to keep moving. That evening, after she got the little ones down and rubbed Noah's back through another coughing spell, Elena sat at the kitchen table under the weak, buzzing lamp. The trailer smelled like canned peaches, damp socks, and vapor rub. The house was finally quiet enough to hear the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. She pulled a notepad toward her and wrote 3 words at the top. By Friday somehow, then below it, she made a list. Diner, laundry, gas station, motel, anywhere hiring. Her eyes burned, her body ached, her heart still had splinters in it, but the pencil moved. And outside, unseen in the dark, someone slowed a car near the trailer just long enough to look at the house, then drove away. Elena never noticed. Not yet. The next day started in darkness again. Not poetic darkness, utility bill darkness. The kitchen light didn't come on. Elena stood in the hallway with one hand on the switch, clicking it twice like disbelief might somehow restore power. But the trailer stayed still and black, except for the watery gray dawn leaking in around the curtains. Then came the small sounds. A baby fussing, a mattress creaking, Noah's cough, deeper now, and Toby's sleepy voice from the back room. Mom, did the house die? Elena closed her eyes. The air felt colder without the hum of electricity. The refrigerator was silent, no buzz from the old lamp, no comforting rattle from the heater fighting for its life, just rainwater dripping outside and the thin whistle of wind slipping through the bad seal on the window above the sink. She swallowed once and answered from the dark. No, baby, we're okay. That was becoming her most used sentence. She found a flashlight in the junk drawer beside the note Daniel had left. Her fingers brushed the folded paper for half a second. A spark of anger shot through her chest so sharp she almost pulled it out and tore it to pieces right there. But the baby cried again. Need always interrupted grief. By the time the children gathered in the kitchen, Elena had lit 2 stubby candles in jelly jars and set a pot of water on the gas stove for oatmeal. The trailer smelled like candle wax, damp air, and the faint sweetness of yesterday's peaches. Shadows flickered across the walls. The twins thought it was exciting for almost 30 seconds. Then Mariah saw the silent refrigerator. The power got shut off? Elena kept stirring. Mom! Elena turned, wooden spoon in hand. Candlelight made her look older, hollowed. It's temporary. Mariah stared at her. How temporary? Elena didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. The twins began asking questions at once. Would the cartoons work? Would the food go bad? Could they still use the bathroom light? Toby, standing in mismatched socks and a superhero shirt with a hole near the collar, looked from face to face and said the one thing nobody else did. Are we getting kicked out? Silence. The stove flame hissed softly under the pot. Elena walked over and crouched in front of him. No one is kicking us out today. Today, again that word, a tiny bridge over a canyon. Toby studied her eyes like he was checking the weather there. Then he nodded once, accepting the answer for what it was. Mariah didn't. What about Friday? She asked quietly. Elena looked at her oldest daughter and felt the cruelty of it, the way childhood was draining out of her one hard fact at a time. We're working on Friday, Elena said. Mariah folded her arms. Who's we? And before Elena could answer, there was a knock at the door. 3 lighter taps this time. Not Renee, not the landlord. Elena opened it to find Mrs. Alvarez from 2 trailers down, holding a foil-covered casserole dish against her chest. Warmth hit first. Baked cheese, onions, and something buttery. The smell floated into the cold trailer like kindness with steam on it. Mrs. Alvarez was in her late 60s, tiny and round, with silver curls pinned up carelessly and slippers that always looked one step from surrender. She was the sort of neighbor who knew everyone's business but somehow made it feel less like gossip and more like weather reporting. I made too much, she said, which was clearly a lie. Figured you might help me with my problem. Elena almost said no. Pride rose fast when you had nothing else left to wear. But Mrs. Setis. Alvarez tilted the dish forward just enough for the smell to do its work, and Toby appeared at Elena's elbow like he'd been summoned by cheese. Is that lasagna? He whispered, reverent. Mrs. Alvarez looked down at him. It was. Until I heard a suspicious little stomach growling from halfway across the park. Toby put a hand over his belly. Traitor. That made her laugh. Even Mariah smiled despite herself. Elena stepped aside. Come in, Mrs. Dyde. Alvarez entered, took one look at the candles, the dark fridge, the kids wrapped in blankets, and lost the smile from her face. They shut you off. Elena set her jaw. Just for now. Mrs. Alvarez didn't push. She just nodded the way women do when they understand the difference between dignity and denial. She uncovered the casserole. Heat rose into the room carrying garlic and tomato and home. The twins nearly climbed onto the counter. Noah, pale on the couch, lifted his head for the first time all morning. For 10 minutes, things felt almost normal. Children eating too fast. Forks scraping plates. Mrs. Alvarez scolding Toby for swallowing without chewing. The sound of someone being cared for. Then she said, the diner on Route 8 is hiring. Elena looked up so sharply her fork stopped midair. Mrs. Alvarez dabbed her mouth with a napkin. Early shift, not glamorous. But tips can be decent if the truckers are in a good mood. Hope entered the room so suddenly it felt dangerous. Mariah looked at Elena. Toby grinned with sauce on his chin. Even the twins seemed to sense the air change. You know this for sure? Elena asked. My niece works the register. Mrs. Marks the register. Alvarez shrugged. Girl quit yesterday. Walked out on lunch rush. Manager's desperate. Desperate. That word could be useful. Elena stood. I can go today. Mrs. Alvarez lifted a hand. There's a catch. Of course there was. It's 60 minutes by bus if you miss the transfer. Shift starts at 5:30 in the morning. Elena's mind began calculating instantly. Bus fare, childcare, Noah's medicine, the baby, the twins, Mariah missing school, Toby trying to help and accidentally setting the place on fire. Still, it was a chance. I'll figure it out, Elena said. Mrs. Doherty. Alvarez gave her a long look. That's what worries me. Elena's shoulders stiffened, but the older woman reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill. No, Elena said it immediately. It's a loan. I can't. You can. You can. Because I'm old and bossy, and I said so. Elena's eyes filled before she could stop them. Mrs. Alvarez? Take it. Elena took it. Her fingers trembled around the bill like it was something holy and fragile, not because of the amount, because it meant somebody had seen her drowning and offered a hand without first asking what she'd done wrong. Mrs. Alvarez patted Toby's head. kissed the baby's hair, and wrote the diner's address on the back of an electric company envelope. At the door, she turned and said, "Sometimes the difference between sinking and standing is just one person believing you can stand." Then she left. The trailer felt different after that. Not safe, not solved, but aimed. Elena washed the casserole dish, braided Mariah's hair with quick, tired fingers, and planned the day in moving pieces. She would go to the diner. She would ask for the job. She would beg if she had to. Tonight she'd figure out how to make the mornings work. Hope is exhausting when you're already tired. By noon, Noah's cough had worsened. At first it was only a rougher sound, a tighter pull in the chest. Elena noticed because mothers always notice, even while doing 6 other things wrong. She felt his forehead. Too warm. The trailer had gone stuffy by then. The air thick with candle smoke and boiled oatmeal and damp laundry hung over chairs to dry. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind the sour smell of wet dirt and motor oil from the gravel lot. Inside, Noah's breathing turned shallow. "Mom," Mariah said from the couch, "listen." Elena bent down. "Wheeze in, catch, wheeze out." Fear moved through her body with awful familiarity. "Noah, baby, where's your inhaler?" His lower lip trembled. "Empty." Elena turned fast. It was not empty yesterday. Noah looked at the blanket in his lap. Toby answered from the kitchen, voice small. "He used it in the night." Elena's stomach dropped. Of course he had. Of course he hadn't woken her because he'd already learned that emergencies had to wait their turn in this house. She grabbed her purse, counted. $8 and some coins. The refill cost more. Her hands went cold. "Not now. Please, not now." She called the clinic. Put on hold. Called the pharmacy. Price confirmed. Higher than she feared. Called Daniel's phone even though she had promised herself she wouldn't. Straight to voicemail. The sound of it, his voice saying, "Leave a message," like he still existed in some ordinary world, nearly made her throw the phone. Instead, she said nothing and hung up. Then Noah started struggling in earnest. Not dramatic, not movie-like, real. The shoulders lifting too hard, the eyes wider, the little hand gripping the couch cushion. The quiet panic that is somehow worse than screaming. The room exploded into motion. Mariah ran for the vapor rub. Toby grabbed the baby before Elena even asked. One twin started crying because everybody else looked scared. The other twin knocked over a candle, and wax spilled across the table in a hot white stream. "Elijah, back up!" Elena snapped. She dropped to her knees in front of Noah and rubbed his back. "Breathe with me, baby. Come on. Slow. Slow." His breath whistled like air through a bent straw. Mrs. Alvarez's $20 lay on the counter. Bus fare, job chance, food, or medicine. There wasn't really a choice. There was only loss management. "Mariah, shoes on," Elena said. "You're coming with me." Mariah looked stunned. "What about the others?" Toby stepped forward, baby on his hip, face serious in a way no 8-year-old's face should ever have to be. "I got them." Elena stared at him. "Toby, I can do it." He shifted the baby higher and looked toward the twins. "We're doing the blanket fort rule, right? Nobody dies. Nobody licks outlets." Under any other sky, she might have laughed. Instead, she almost broke. Mrs. Broke. Alvarez must have still been outside because before Elena could decide whether trusting an 8-year-old for even 10 minutes was insane, there came another knock, and that small, sturdy woman reappeared as if the universe had sent her back. "I forgot my umbrella," she began, then saw Noah. Everything changed in her face. "Go," she said immediately. "I'll stay with the others." Elena didn't waste one more second. The trip to the pharmacy felt endless. Cold air, fast steps, Noah limp against her shoulder, Mariah beside her carrying the empty inhaler and trying not to cry. The bus smelled like wet coats and old fries. Every stop felt cruel. Every red light felt personal. Elena kept whispering the same thing into Noah's hair. "Just make it to morning. Just make it to morning." Mariah heard it. "Mom," she whispered, "it's not morning." Elena looked at her daughter, eyes burning, and said the truth. "It means survive." Mariah swallowed hard and nodded like she understood more than a 12-year-old ever should. By the time they got back, Noah had the refill, 2 puffs in, and a little more color returning to his face. Mrs. Alvarez had the twins quiet with coloring books. Toby had somehow fed the baby mashed bananas and built half a blanket fort in the living room. He looked up proudly when Elena came in. Nobody licked anything, and there he was again, that strange, bright little soul in the wreckage. But the $20 was gone, the bus money, the first shift chance, the fragile path to Friday. That evening, after the children fell asleep in a pile of blankets and candle shadows, Elena sat at the table with the diner address in one hand and the pharmacy receipt in the other. One hope ally had appeared, and still hope had disappointed, because kindness wasn't the same as rescue. It never had been. The trailer was quiet except for Noah's steadier breathing and the low groan of wind outside. Candlelight trembled over the walls. The note from Daniel was still in the junk drawer. The rent was still due. Friday was still coming. Then Elena noticed something she hadn't seen before. Tucked underneath the pharmacy receipt in her purse was a second folded paper. Not hers, not a bill, a note. In shaky blue ink, just 4 words, check the old toolbox. Elena stared at it. No name, no explanation, no sound outside except the wind. And in the dark under her sink, behind a stack of cracked plastic bowls and an empty detergent bottle, sat Daniel's old rusted metal toolbox. She had not opened it once since he left, until now. The note stayed in Elena's hand for a full 10 seconds before she moved. Not because she was confused, because she was afraid. Afraid of hope, afraid of answers. Afraid that anything connected to Daniel would open a wound she'd barely managed to stitch shut with routine and exhaustion. The trailer was quiet now except for the soft rattle of rain starting up again and the occasional sleepy cough from Noah's bed. Candlelight flickered over the sink, turning the kitchen walls gold, then gray, then gold again. The room smelled like vapor rub, old dish soap, and the metal tang of the cooling stove. Elena knelt slowly at the cabinet under the sink, behind the bowls, behind the half-empty bleach bottle, behind a bag of clothespins and a warped cutting board. There it was. Daniel's old red toolbox. Rust along the edges, one latch bent, the handle cracked on one side. It smelled faintly of machine oil and the garage they used to dream about owning someday, back when, someday, still sounded like a place and not a joke. Mariah had come into the kitchen without Elena hearing her. "Mom?" Elena looked over her shoulder. Candlelight caught the worry in her daughter's face. "Go back to bed, baby." Mariah glanced at the box. "What is that?" Elena's fingers tightened around the note. "I don't know yet." But Mariah stayed. Of course she did. Children stay when the air changes. Elena set the toolbox on the table. The metal legs scraped softly against the linoleum. For a second, she only stared at it, feeling her heartbeat in her throat. Then she flipped the latch. It stuck. She pulled harder. It snapped open with a sharp metallic click that made both of them flinch. Inside, not tools, not exactly, a few wrenches, a screwdriver, loose nails in the corner, but under those, an envelope, thick, yellowed, and beneath it, a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band gone brittle with age. Mariah stepped closer. "What is all that?" Elena lifted the envelope first. No stamp, no address, just one word written across the front in Daniel's uneven block letters. Elena, her breath caught. Mariah saw it too. "He wrote you a letter?" Elena didn't answer. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Like it had been waiting. Like it knew what damage it could still do. Outside, thunder rolled low and far off. The baby sighed in his sleep from the other room. Somewhere inside the walls, pipes gave a tired knock. Elena opened the envelope. A folded letter. And something else. A cashier's check. Mariah gasped softly. Elena stared at the amount and blinked once, then twice, because the number looked unreal in the weak candlelight. 8,400. Her chair scraped backward as she sat down hard. Mariah looked between the check and her mother's face. "Mom?" Elena unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The paper smelled dusty, old, hidden. She read the first line silently, then stopped breathing right for a second. Mariah whispered, "What does it say?" Elena swallowed. Then she read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to hand it to you myself." The room seemed to contract around the words. Rain tapped harder against the window. Elena kept reading. "I know how that sounds. Cowardly, maybe it is. But I need you to know one thing before you hate me all the way. I did not leave because I stopped loving the kids. And I did not leave because of another woman." Mariah frowned. "Then why did he leave?" Elena's eyes moved faster now, scanning, refusing, meeting. Her voice came quieter. "I left because I lost more than my job. I lost money I borrowed, stupid money, ugly money. I thought I could fix things fast and never let you know how bad it got. I was wrong. By the time I understood what I'd done, men were already coming by the shop asking questions. One of them came to the house while you were at the store. Mariah answered the door. That was the moment I knew I had brought danger to the wrong place. Mariah's face changed. She remembered. Elena looked up sharply. What men? Mariah hesitated. A long time ago, before he left, there was this guy. He asked if Dad was home. He smiled, but it felt fake. I didn't tell you because Dad told me not to. He said it was work stuff. Elena felt cold all over. She went back to the letter. I told myself I could fix it, pay it back, make it disappear. But debt like that doesn't disappear. It grows teeth. If I stayed, I was going to drag all of you under with me. So I took what I had left, sold my truck title, and left the check hidden where they wouldn't look first. I thought I'd come back when it was safe. Then shame got bigger than courage. Elena stopped there. Shame got bigger than courage. A sentence like that could ruin a person because of how honest it sounded. Mariah's voice was thin. He had money this whole time? Elena looked down at the check. Money, rent, lights, medicine, food, survival, all sitting folded in an envelope beneath a pile of wrenches while she watered powdered milk and apologized to children for being hungry. Her chest rose once, sharply. Then came the anger, not the hot, quick anger from before. This was worse. This was the anger of discovering that while she was ripping herself apart trying to keep 5 small lives afloat, the truth had been rusting quietly under her own sink. Elena stood so suddenly the chair tipped. Mariah stepped back. He left this here? Elena said, her voice shaking. He left this here? The words cracked on the second time. Rain hammered the roof now. The candle guttered. Thunder rolled closer. Mariah reached for her. Mom, no. Elena pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. No, no, no. Not because she didn't believe it. Because she did. Because it fit Daniel too well. The panic, the pride, the stupid male fantasy of protecting his family by disappearing and forcing the woman he loved to carry the blast alone. She looked back at the photos with sudden urgency. There were 6 of them, old Polaroids, slightly bent. One showed Daniel standing beside a pickup truck Elena didn't recognize, thinner than she remembered, beard grown in, eyes tired. Another showed him outside what looked like a motel office. In one, he was holding a folded newspaper. The date was visible, 3 years earlier, so he had lived. He had watched time move. He had taken pictures like proof for someone. For her? Her hands trembled as she flipped to the last photo. Mariah leaned in. It was a picture of their children, not together, from a distance. Mariah outside school, Toby at a bus stop. Elena pushing the twins in a thrift store stroller with the baby on her hip, and Noah walking close beside her, taken from far enough away to hide. Close enough to hurt. Mariah's breath caught. He was here? Elena felt suddenly sick. Not with fear exactly, with violation. With grief wearing a new coat, he had seen them, seen her, seen what survival looked like on her body and still stayed gone. At the bottom of the envelope, one more slip of paper waited, torn from a notebook. A name and address written in darker ink. Caleb's Auto and Tire, Mason Road. Elena stared at it. Who's Caleb? Mariah asked. Elena shook her head. I don't know, but a memory tickled at the edge of her mind. Daniel mentioning a Caleb once, someone from the garage, someone who always knew a shortcut, which usually meant trouble. Mariah's eyes lifted to the check again. Can we use it? The question hung there. Rent, power, medicine, Friday. Elena closed her eyes. This money could change the week, maybe the month, maybe more, but it felt contaminated. Not illegal maybe, not dirty in the technical sense, just soaked in absence. Every dollar had been aged in silence. Every cent had arrived late enough to bruise. Still, children cannot eat moral purity. Elena looked at her daughter. Tomorrow, I'm cashing it. Mariah nodded once. No judgment, just relief. Then, after a pause, and then what? Elena looked down at the address in her hand, then at the photo of Daniel watching from a distance, then at the front door as thunder shook the thin trailer walls. Then, she said, voice low, I find out the rest. By morning, the rain had cleared but left the world raw. The gravel outside the trailer sparkled wet under a pale sky. The air smelled like mud, cold metal, and the coffee Mrs. Alvarez was already brewing somewhere nearby. Inside, the children woke hungry and loud, the way children do even when the world has shifted again overnight. Elena moved differently now, still tired, still worried, but sharpened. She fed them toast from the last dry slices, dressed the little ones, kissed Noah's forehead, and tucked the envelope deep inside her purse. Toby noticed immediately. "You got detective eyes," he said around a mouthful of toast. Elena paused. "What?" He pointed at her face. "Like on cop shows. Squinty, serious, kinda mad." Mariah almost smiled. "That's just her regular face lately," Toby grinned. "No, regular face is tired face. This is mission face. Mission face." Elena looked at him and, despite everything, a tiny laugh escaped. That boy. Always dragging light into rooms that did not deserve it. Mrs. Alvarez came over to watch the children while Elena went into town. She didn't ask many questions when Elena mentioned the bank. She just looked at the envelope, looked at Elena's face, and said, "Whatever truth you found, don't let it make you reckless." Elena answered honestly, "It already has." The bank clerk looked suspicious at first, then apologetic, then efficient. The check was real. Verified. Cleared through an account that had been closed shortly after issuance but covered in full. Old, but still negotiable after manager approval. Elena signed papers with a hand that did not quite feel like hers. When the cash was finally counted onto the counter, she stared at it in stunned silence. So much struggle, reduced to a stack. She paid the electric bill first, then the water, then enough rent to stop Friday from becoming a cliff. At the pharmacy, she filled Noah's prescription and bought proper formula and cough medicine and even a box of cereal with bright colors on it because the twins had forgotten what choosing a cereal felt like. Every purchase felt practical and furious. By noon, the lights were back on. The refrigerator hummed to life with a shudder. The old lamp buzzed. The trailer, for the first time in days, sounded inhabited by normal things instead of emergency. The twins cheered. Toby saluted the ceiling fan when it began to spin. "Welcome back, electricity," he said solemnly. "We missed your talents." Even Noah smiled from the couch, colors slowly returning to his face. Mariah, though, watched Elena. Because she knew, because children know. That afternoon, Elena took the address from her purse and got on the bus alone. Mason Road was on the far edge of town where repair shops, salvage lots, and storage yards sat shoulder to shoulder behind chain-link fences. The air there smelled like hot rubber, oil, and sun-warmed dust. Dogs barked behind one fence. A radio played old country music somewhere out of sight. Men in stained shirts moved around cars with the heavy silence of people too busy or too tired to waste words. Caleb's Auto and Tire sat between a pawn shop and an empty lot full of weeds. The sign was sun-faded. One of the bulbs in the office window flickered. Elena stepped inside. A bell chimed overhead. The office smelled like burnt coffee, grease, and paper that had lived too long in filing cabinets. A fan turned lazily in the corner. Behind the counter sat a heavyset man in his 50s wearing reading glasses low on his nose. He looked up. "Yes?" Elena placed the photograph of Daniel on the counter. The man's face changed instantly. Small change, important change. Recognition first, then caution. "You Caleb?" Elena asked. He took off his glasses slowly. "Who's asking?" "Elena Carter." That landed harder. His jaw tightened. He glanced toward the garage bay, then back to her. "I was wondering if I'd ever meet you," he said. Elena's pulse kicked up. "Then you know where he is." Caleb exhaled through his nose and leaned back in the chair like a man who had hoped this day would stay hypothetical. "I know where he was." Elena's voice went cold. "Start there." He studied her face for a long moment, probably looking for weakness, probably finding none. Finally, he reached under the counter and pulled out a small lockbox. From it, he removed a folded newspaper clipping and slid it across to her. Elena looked down. A local article. Small. Buried. 3 years old. "Man injured in Higway." Garage fire. Her fingers went numb. She scanned the column. No death listed. No full details. Just enough to make her heartbeat go strange. Then she saw the name. Not Daniel Carter. Daniel Cole. An alias. Caleb spoke quietly. He was working under that name after he left. Elena looked up, eyes sharp. "Why?" "Because the men he owed weren't the kind you corrected with a forwarding address." The office fan clicked as it turned. Somewhere outside, an air wrench shrieked and stopped. Elena held the clipping tighter. "Did he die in that fire?" Caleb didn't answer fast enough. Her voice dropped lower. "Did he die?" Caleb rubbed a hand over his mouth. "No," he said. Relief hit so suddenly it felt almost like pain, and then anger crushed right over it. "He lived. He barely lived. He lived." Caleb nodded once. Elena's eyes filled, but her stare did not break. Then where is he? Caleb looked at the photo in her hand. Then the clipping. Then finally, directly at her. And when he answered, the words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded worse. They sounded true. He's been in a rehab facility in Knoxville for almost 2 years, Caleb said. After the fire. After the drinking got worse. After everything finally caught him. Elena went completely still. Rehab. Drinking. 2 years. All those nights. All those bills. All those children asking where Dad went. And he had been alive somewhere learning how to survive the wreckage he made. Caleb kept talking, maybe because silence had become unbearable. He made me promise not to tell you until he stayed sober a full year. Then 1 year turned into another because he kept saying he didn't deserve to come back until he had something to offer. Elena laughed then. One awful, disbelieving sound. Something to offer? Caleb winced. He sent money when he could, Caleb said. Not enough, I know. He had me hold some of it. I told him to send it directly. He wouldn't. Said if you took it too early, you'd come looking, and he wanted you safe. Elena stepped back from the counter as if the room itself had become dirty. Safe. Again that word. That coward's word. That man's word for disappearing and calling it sacrifice. Caleb reached for a piece of paper. I have the address. Elena stared at him. He stopped moving, because he saw it then. This wasn't a reunion story yet. This was a reckoning. And Elena Carter had spent too many nights in the dark for anyone to mistake her tears for softness. She took the paper, folded it once, slipped it into her purse beside the clipping, the photo, the old letter. Then she looked Caleb dead in the eye and said, he doesn't get to come back as a hero in his own version of this story. Caleb lowered his gaze. No, ma'am. When Elena stepped back outside, the late sun hit her face hard. The whole salvage road shimmered in dusty gold. Engines growled. Metal clanged. Somewhere, somebody laughed. Normal sounds. Cruel sounds. She stood there with the rehab address in her purse and realized something with terrifying clarity. The man who left was not dead. The man who suffered was not gone. The man who had watched from a distance and hidden behind shame and recovery and promises to do better might soon stand in front of the family he had abandoned. And at home, her children still didn't know the full truth. Not yet. Elena did not tell the children that night. Not because she wanted to protect Daniel, because she needed one last evening where their faces were still untouched by this new kind of hurt. The trailer felt different now that the lights were back on. The refrigerator hummed. The lamp buzzed its tired little buzz above the kitchen table. The twins argued over cereal prizes. Noah's medicine had finally softened the tight sound in his chest. The baby slept with one fist open beside his cheek. And Toby, barefoot, shirt half untucked, hair sticking up in impossible directions, was using 2 spoons and a measuring cup to conduct an orchestra no one had asked for. Violins, he shouted, banging the cup gently. Mariah rolled her eyes from the sink. That's a spoon. It's art, Toby said. And Elena stood there at the stove stirring cheap macaroni, watching them in the warm yellow light, feeling the truth like a stone in her pocket. Alive. Their father was alive, not dead, not gone forever, not lost to some nameless road, alive enough to hide, alive enough to recover, alive enough to wait. Her throat tightened so hard she had to turn away for a second. Mariah noticed. Of course she did. Later, after the little ones were asleep and Noah's breathing had settled into something less frightening, Mariah found her sitting alone at the kitchen table. The envelope, the clipping, and the folded rehab address lay in front of her under the lamp. Mariah stopped at the doorway. You found him, not a question. Elena looked up slowly. Yes. Mariah came closer, each step careful. Is he dead? Elena shook her head once. Mariah went still. The silence between them swelled. Then Mariah laughed a little, not because anything was funny, but because shock sometimes comes out wearing the wrong face. He's alive? Elena nodded. Mariah stared at the table, at the papers, at the shape of the answer before she could bear to ask the next question. Where? Elena's voice came out tired. A rehab facility. In Knoxville. Mariah frowned like the sentence didn't fit in her mouth. Rehab? Elena slid the letter toward her. Mariah read in silence. Elena watched the emotions pass over her daughter's face like weather crossing open land. Confusion, hope, anger, hurt, understanding, then anger again, darker this time. When she finished, she set the letter down carefully. He watched us? Elena didn't soften it. At least once. Mariah's eyes filled immediately. Why would he do that? Because shame is selfish, because broken people still break others, because some men mistake disappearing for sacrifice when really it's just leaving the pain with someone else. But Elena only said, because he was not brave enough to come closer. Mariah wiped her face with the heel of her hand, furious at the tears. Do the boys know? No. Will you tell them? Elena looked down at the address in her hands. Tomorrow. Mariah's jaw tightened. Are we going there? Elena met her eyes. Yes. The drive to Knoxville came 3 days later in a borrowed church van that smelled like coffee, vinyl seats, and faint lemon cleaner. Mrs. Now. Alvarez had pulled strings through someone she knew at church. She did not ask too many questions, only packed sandwiches, baby wipes, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. You look like a woman about to either forgive somebody or bury them, she said as she handed Elena the keys. Elena answered honestly, I haven't decided. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. Good. Don't rush. The children sat in uneven rows behind her. The twins fought over window space. Noah leaned against a pillow with his inhaler in his lap. The baby slept on and off in Mariah's arms. Toby had been quiet for the first 20 minutes, which in Toby time was the equivalent of a national emergency. Then he leaned forward between the seats and whispered, So, are we picking Dad up or dropping him off somewhere dramatic? Mariah hissed. Toby. But Elena almost smiled. That boy always threw one odd-shaped truth into the room so people had to step around it honestly. She kept her eyes on the road. Gray sky above. Bare trees rushing by. Trucks growling past. We're going to talk. Toby considered that. Talking is never just talking in this family. No one argued. The rehab facility sat on the edge of town beyond a line of winter-thin trees, red brick and plain windows, clean but impersonal. The parking lot smelled like wet asphalt. Somewhere nearby, a lawn crew had cut damp grass, and the scent floated sharp through the cool air. A flag snapped weakly on a pole near the entrance. Elena parked and gripped the steering wheel. For a second, she could not move. Her children were behind her. Her whole reason for surviving was behind her. And somewhere inside that building was the man who had once promised to help carry life with her, and instead handed her the whole weight and vanished. Mariah touched her shoulder. Mom, Elena breathed in, then out. Just make it to morning, she whispered. Toby heard it. It's noon. Elena let out one brief laugh through her nerves. It still counts. They went inside. The lobby was too quiet. Soft shoes on polished floors. Coffee from a break room somewhere down the hall. A television mounted in the corner with closed captions and no sound. A receptionist with gentle eyes looked up, then down at her list, then back at Elena as if she recognized a difficult story when it entered the room. Family meeting room, she said softly. They're bringing him now. They're bringing him now, like he was a package, like he was a patient first and a husband second, like whatever came next could be managed by office procedure. The room they waited in had beige walls, a tissue box, 6 chairs, 1 couch, and a painting of a lake trying too hard to look peaceful. Noah sat close to Elena. The twins whispered. The baby chewed on his sleeve. Mariah stood with both arms folded tight across her chest. Toby swung his legs under his chair and stared at the door like it might reveal a magic trick. Then it opened. Daniel stepped in, and every fantasy anyone might have had about this moment died instantly. He looked older than the years, thinner. Shoulders bent in a way that had nothing to do with posture and everything to do with consequence. His beard was trimmed now, but gray had crept into it. A pale scar ran from under his jaw into his collar. His hands shook once before he clasped them together. Hospital clean soap clung to him, along with that flat institutional smell of fresh sheets and medication in rooms where people learn to admit what they've ruined. He saw the children first, and broke, not loudly, not theatrically. Just a man whose face collapsed under the weight of what he had missed. Mariah turned away immediately. Noah pressed into Elena's side. The twins stared. Toby whispered, with devastating innocence, "He looks like Dad, left in the rain." Daniel gave a broken laugh sob at that, and it only made everything hurt worse. "Elena," he said. She did not stand, did not cry, did not rescue him from the shape of her silence. He looked at each child. Mariah, Toby, Noah. Then his eyes landed on the younger two and the baby, and the reality hit him fresh. The years he had not earned the right to know. First words, fevers, birthdays, shoes bought too small then replaced too late, school mornings, hungry nights, Tiny triumphs, all of it. The counselor in the corner quietly asked, "Would you like privacy?" Elena answered without looking away from Daniel. No, that word mattered. Because he had left in private, she had suffered in private. But truth? Truth was going to stand in the room with witnesses. The counselor nodded and remained by the door. Daniel swallowed. "I don't expect." Elena cut him off. "Good." Her voice was calm enough to scare him more than yelling ever could. He nodded once, eyes red. "I wrote," he said. "I sent money when I could." Caleb said. Caleb said many things. Elena leaned forward. "Here's one thing I want said clearly in front of our children. You left me to tell 5 babies why the lights were off." Daniel closed his eyes. She kept going. "You left me to stretch powdered milk to choose between rent and medicine. To hear Toby ask if the house died to watch Mariah stop being a child because there was no room for it to sit by Noah when he couldn't breathe and know there was no one else coming through the door." Each sentence landed like a stone. Daniel's shoulders folded lower with everyone. "I know," he whispered. "No," Elena said. "You know now. I lived it then." The room went still. The twins, sensing the importance, even if not the details, stopped fidgeting. Noah stared at his father with wide, careful eyes. The baby pressed his face into Mariah's sweater. Daniel looked at the floor. "I thought if I stayed away until I got clean, until I had money, until I was worth something again." Toby blurted, "We needed a dad, not a coupon." No one moved. Then Daniel looked at Toby and covered his mouth with his hand because there it was, the truth. Childish, imperfect, and impossible to argue with. Elena's eyes flashed wet for half a second. Toby shrank a little. "Was that rude?" Mariah, without taking her eyes off Daniel, said, "It was correct." She got the diner job eventually. Early shift, coffee-stained apron, aching feet, decent tips on good days. Mrs. Alvarez took the little ones in the mornings until the school bus came for the older 3. Mariah grew into herself again little by little. Noah's breathing improved with regular medicine. Toby continued being the kind of child who made hardship hate itself by refusing to become grim. Years moved, as they do, not healing everything, just layering life over the wound until the wound becomes part of the shape. Then came the day that explained the title. It was a spring afternoon, bright and windy, at the community center gym where folding chairs had been set up in long, neat rows under strings of paper stars. The place smelled like floor polish, sheet cake icing, cheap flowers, and warm bodies in church clothes. A local nonprofit was holding a ceremony honoring single mothers who had held families together through crisis. Women nominated by teachers, social workers, neighbors, grown children. Elena did not want to go. Mrs. Alvarez insisted. Mariah pushed. Toby said there would probably be free cake, which in his theology meant destiny. So Elena went in a simple blue dress and shoes that pinched by the second hour. She expected a certificate, a clap, an awkward photo. What she did not expect was Mariah walking to the podium. By then Mariah was older, poised, voice steady in public, the way children of chaos sometimes become, fluent in pressure. The microphone squealed once. She smiled nervously. The crowd settled. Elena sat in the 3rd row with the boys and the younger 2 beside her. Daniel was there too, in the back on purpose, sober for over 3 years now, hands folded, eyes already glassy. Mariah unfolded a page, then looked up and didn't read it. She just spoke. "When my dad left, my mom had 5 kids, almost no money, and more reasons to quit than I can count," she said. "The lights got shut off. The rent was late. My brother couldn't breathe some nights. We ate things stretched so thin they barely counted as meals. But every morning, and I mean every single morning, she would get up and say the same thing." Mariah paused. Elena already knew. Still, it hit her. "Just make it to morning." A murmur moved through the room. Mariah's voice shook only once. "I used to think that meant she was surviving day by day because she had no choice. But now I know it meant something bigger. It meant she believed mornings still mattered. That tomorrow was still worth reaching for, even when today was humiliating, unfair, and lonely." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. On stage, Mariah looked at her directly. "My mother taught us that love is not the person who promises. Love is the person who stays. Love is the one who remembers your medicine, splits the last peach 5 ways, lies and says she already ate, and somehow still finds enough softness left to tuck you in." The room had gone quiet in the way rooms do when everyone is trying not to cry at the same time. Toby whispered loudly to Noah, "She's cooking." Noah elbowed him without looking away. Mariah kept going. "People praise resilience like it's pretty. It's not. I watched what it cost her. I watched her carry fear in one hand and groceries in the other. I watched her choose us every time. So if you ask me what strength looks like, it looks like my mother standing in a dark kitchen hearing 5 children need her at once and answering all of them." Elena's mouth trembled. Daniel in the back lowered his head. Mariah unfolded the page then, but she didn't need it. Her next words came from somewhere deeper. "The reason my tears said it all, the first time I saw this award list is because one line in the nomination was true. Her children survived because she refused to make her pain their identity. That is her legacy." Then she smiled through tears. "And Mom? We made it to morning." That did it. Elena broke, not elegantly, not quietly. Tears spilled fast and full and unstoppable, the kind that come from years of held breath finally finding permission. She covered her mouth the same way she had the night Daniel left, but this time not to keep the pain in, to keep the gratitude from knocking her apart. The gym blurred into light and color. Applause rose around her, warm and thunderous. Toby started clapping over his head like a maniac. The twins copied him. Noah cried openly. Daniel stood in the back but did not move forward, and for once that was the right choice. Mrs. Alvarez, sitting beside Elena in a floral blouse and orthopedic shoes, reached over and squeezed her hand. "Told you there'd be cake," Toby whispered, because of course he did, and Elena laughed through tears. Those tears said everything words had run out of saying. They said, "I was tired, I was scared, I was furious, I was lonely. I did it anyway." They said, "You left, we lived. That matters." They said, "Love stayed." When Elena finally stood to accept the award, she looked at the plaque only briefly, then at her children, all 5 of them, taller now, older, softer in some places, scarred in others, alive in a way survival had earned. She stepped to the microphone. The room quieted. And Elena, with tears still bright on her face, said only this: "There were a lot of nights I thought we wouldn't make it, but we did. Not because I was extraordinary, because children keep calling you back to love, even when grief is louder. So if anyone here is in the dark part right now, just make it to morning." Silence. Then the loudest applause of the afternoon, and somewhere in the back, Daniel cried without asking anyone to notice, which was fitting, because this was never the story of the man who left. It was the story of the woman who stayed, the woman who turned humiliation into shelter, fear into routine, poverty into proof that dignity can survive almost anything, and one repeated sentence into a family legacy. Just make it to morning. And years later, when her tears came, they did say it all.